All right. So welcome back to another episode of the Litigators Network. We're super excited, very thrilled to have the amazing Megan Demshki with us today. Welcome, Megan.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kenny.
Megan is a leader in the plaintiff's bar in Southern California, certainly in the Inland Empire. If something is happening that's of good in the plaintiff's bar, chances are that Megan is behind it. So we're very thrilled to have her. And, you know, Megan is an expert in many areas. Today, she's going to be talking to us about the free online tools that are available to us in government entity cases, government tort cases. It's a conversation. I think it's so much gold to this because there are tools that are available for our cases that we don't need to break the bank on, but can be very critical in determining the outcome of your case. So thank you, Megan. Let's get started. Can you tell us about what are these tools and kind of in what types of cases they're relevant?
You know, generally today our focus is going to be on online tools that would be beneficial in a government tort case. So think a dangerous condition of public property case, maybe a negligent maintenance case. Some of these tools could even be beneficial when you're looking at any type of mass torts or significant injury cases involving public entities as well. But we're going to spend most of our time today talking about SWITRS and TIMS reports, which would be most beneficial to utilize in cases involving dangerous condition or negligent maintenance of public property.
Okay, great. Okay, so you mentioned SWITRS and TIMS. Can you just tell us a little bit what is that? What is SWITRS?
Absolutely. So SWITRS stands for the Statewide Integrated Traffic Records System, or SWITRS. Mm-hmm. And that's data that is maintained by the California CHP. It's a statewide database that collects injury data statewide. The CHP and the state of California then use it for their own purposes, but it is publicly available data that we can use in our cases to see if there are similar instances of injuries at certain intersections that could help prove that a certain intersection or roadway is a dangerous condition, or there's been certain types of negligent maintenance in that section of the roadway.
Okay, great.
And then Tim, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
And then TIMS stands for the Transportation Injury Mapping System. And that's where Cal Berkeley has taken all of this data that the CHP has recorded over 10 years, and they geocode those injury accidents statewide on a map that is publicly available at the click of a button, completely free, and you can access it. You could go access it right now. It has data up until 2023. The data is provisional for the years 2022 and 2023 right now, but it goes all the way back to 2012. So every intersection in the state of California from 2012 to 2023 has any injury collision mapped in the TIMS online system. I would note that TIMS only has injury accidents, whereas SWITRS are broader than that and include property damage only as well. Right.
Cool. You know, it's funny because I remember when I first started practicing, first, second year attorney, and we had government entity cases, right? And you're going after a city or county or for a dangerous condition on the roadway. And we'd ask our expert, get the SWITRS information, and the expert would take some time to get it back to us. And that's just kind of what I thought happened. You reached out to your expert, and the expert, did his little, with their expertise, would get that information. And then it wasn't until years later, literally, that I was like, oh, this is available, that I can just grab it, right?
Absolutely. And what used to happen at our office when I first started as a law clerk 11 years ago is we would have our investigator go and get the SWITRS for, or our expert. But again, then you're paying top dollar to have somebody else go get information that is publicly available. So you can go and access the SWITRS information from the CHP website directly. You have to create a login and a password, but then that's also free. Why I prefer TIMS over going to the CHP website is TIMS is visually much more pleasing. You're able to see where in the intersection it took place. It provides a bit more information in that you have the Google map accessible to you at the click of a button. Whereas the CHP, you submit a request and about 24 hours, it's supposed to be 24 hours later. Sometimes it's a little bit more. They email you a series of Excel spreadsheets that are very voluminous, and you have to go through and try to decipher the information that relates to your intersection. So I find TIMS to be an easier, more accessible, faster way to access that data. But yeah, there is no need for you to go run out and hire an expert or an investigator to get this at least basic information. Obviously, then you're looking at it and evaluating if you need to go hire an expert to interpret that data. But you're at least able to know at the click of a button, have there been any prior accidents in the last 10 years at this intersection or not? And in fact, it's a tool I frequently use going into new client meetings, right? So a potential client says, my accident, this recent incident happened at this certain intersection. Before that meeting, I can go on TIMS, pull up that intersection, see if there's any other similar accidents that occurred. And then I can go into that potential client meeting with information that some of my competitors may or may not be bringing to that meeting, and have a more informed conversation with my clients about different avenues of recovery that may or may not be available to them.
Megan, that's great advice. That's awesome because it's true, right? I mean, when you're meeting with a potential, the difference between what you're doing and what some other firm is doing even makes a huge difference. And as plaintiff attorneys as well, who, we remain cost conscious to some degree, right?
Absolutely.
Being able to access this critical information without having to pay somebody to go get it, right? When it's available for free, is great.
And it allows you to give it a cursory look, obviously not as an expert, but after practicing in this area for a while, you're able to look at the intersection, the data available publicly to see, okay, is there a little bit of hope that there's going to be an avenue of recovery that could meet the needs for my client's care, or, are we going to have to look elsewhere? And so it is an excellent door to open to at least start the conversation and see what is available. And unlike, I believe we also are going to touch today briefly on the California Public Records Act, the CPRA, and the Freedom of Information Act, which is often referred to as FOIA, which is similar principle, but at the federal level. Those are also is also an incredible way to gain information about your matter for free, simply submitting a request. Most of them are in online portals now, but those tend to take 10 days, 2 weeks, sometimes significantly more time to get information back from the public entities because they have to go and collect it. Whereas the TIMS report gives you immediate access to those SWITRS as long as you have a login and a password. So if this is something that you think you might have reason to use in the future, I would encourage you to go make that login and password on the TIMS website today, so that when you need to use it, you have access to it. Because it does take, you submit your request, and then it maybe takes an hour or so by the time it makes it through your spam filter to get your password from them. But once you have that password, then all of this resource is just available to you and free. So it's definitely a great resource.
That's awesome. Okay, so I do want, and I think all our listeners are going to have a real treat today by hearing what you're going to talk about TIMS and how to go about all of that. Before we go to that, you did mention the California Public Records Act and FOIA as well, CPRA and FOIA. Can you just tell our listeners kind of what that is and how that can continue to help in getting that information?
Absolutely. So the California Public Records Act requires public entities to allow you access to information as a member of the public. So not in your role as an attorney and not in formal discovery, but before you've ever filed a lawsuit, maybe you're just investigating a matter and you don't even know if you're going to sign up that client. You are able to go either send written correspondence, or many different counties and cities and Caltrans now have online portals where you can submit requests right in their portal for various different kinds of public records. So it could be complaints. We often do for complaints. It could be for accident data. For example, the city of Los Angeles maintains their own version of SWITRS. They don't call them SWITRS, but a similar, they record accidents in their own manner. And so you're able to submit these requests. They are supposed, any government entity is supposed to respond to them in 10 days. They can extend that an additional 14 days. It's supposed to be in writing. Some of these entities are better than others. We're currently actually in litigation right now over violations of the California Public Records Act in one of our cases, because we think it's that important, giving the public access to this information and holding these entities responsible for meeting those 10 and 14 day deadlines, and also, having the breadth of response that they're supposed to once they do produce those records. But those records can be, I'm going to pull up some different examples. So it could be as-built plans for the subject roadway you're looking at. We often ask for agendas or minutes from different, maybe city council meetings or board of supervisor meetings where they may be discussing a particular intersection that's been problematic over the time. It could be other government tort claims, and you can see what other people have complained about at certain intersections. Signal phasing, traffic studies, different accident history, like I mentioned. Maintenance records can be very important. And this all can help build different types of government tort cases depending on the issue at hand. And then, going in before you filed your lawsuit, what's out there. And oftentimes I'm seeing that the response to a CPRA request is better and more broad and less restrictive than what I'm actually seeing in formal discovery when I ask for the same information, right? And so these are powerful.
Curious how that happens.
And it's so unfortunate, but just last week I was taking a deposition where I had the redacted version of a report from formal discovery, and I had an unredacted version from a CPRA request. The redaction had not been identified in the document that was produced in formal discovery. And that ended up being a really key piece of information in our case. And it was all from a CPRA request that was from several years ago that we did before we even really truly knew all the issues in that matter. That's a case involving the negligent failure to uphold mandatory duties. And so my point with that being, it's not just cases involving dangerous condition or negligent maintenance. It really, when it comes to government tort cases, CPRA requests and FOIA requests can be just vital for your case. And so definitely something to do, maybe even before you formally opened the matter, because it's quick, it's easy, and it's, a free resource available to you. FOIA is really just the federal version of that. And those are for federal entities. FOIA.gov is an incredible online resource where there's just tons and tons of different agencies that are listed A to Z. And you can just go on there and scroll through and see any that may be relevant to your matter. For example, you can go to the National Transportation Safety Board website right from FOIA.gov, where you can then enter your FOIA request, or you can see if there's just publicly available documents already uploaded for you. So for example, one of our matters, if I go on the National Transportation Safety Board website right now, I can download over 2,000 pages of reports related to one of our accidents, just right there at the click of a button. And FOIA.gov also gives you average processing time for your FOIA request, which can give you just some indication of maybe how to inform your client, like, hey, this is a 10-day request, this is a 30-day request. And that can at least give you and your client some expectations going into making that FOIA request of how fast they're going to get back to you. But again, FOIA and CPRA, similar resources, similar access, but I really feel like they are underutilized tools to find out as much as humanly possible about your matter. And it's through that kind of investigation, I think, that it allows for creativity in your theories of your case, right? So way where someone might just, if they do the most basic investigation, may just see one avenue of recovery for our clients. The more investigation you do into the matter, you may be able to find different avenues of recovery as to defendants you had not previously considered.
Yeah. No, that's great. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Megan. And the way that you're framing it, I think this is so critical for everyone listening, is that it's not just a matter of that, these requests can be helpful or they're convenient, right? But in the example you gave about discovery being not as broad as
Yeah.
a public records request production, then it becomes not just helpful and convenient, but it's necessary, right? And critical for you to do that in the beginning, even to get that information. Otherwise, you might be missing out on critical information.
Absolutely. And with the government tort claims statute, which requires you to put the government on notice of a potential claim within 6 months of the incident, doing this type of early investigation can help you determine if there are other government entities out there that might not be immediately obvious to you.
Yeah.
For example, a roadway in, let's say, the city of Riverside, right? You might think that that roadway is maintained by the city.
Yeah.
There are many roadways throughout California where there are more than one entity that has their hands in it, right? So it may be the city of Riverside and the county, it might be the city of Riverside and Caltrans. It might be that this side of the roadway city and this side's county. And if you failed to put the proper entities on notice, that could either bar your claim or create a whole lot of headaches down the road. And truly unnecessary headaches if you've used some of these resources that are available to you from before day one. So
Yeah. It's funny. I'm actually dealing with one right now that the ownership has been, in question, that everything online says it's one, city and, everything said it, but through these requests and everything we receive, we're like, oh, that they're actually not the owners. Wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
It's like this one little spot within the city that's carved out for the state.
Of course, right? Just to keep us on our toes.
Yeah. All right, cool. So thank you for that. So free online tools, critical tools, SWITRS, we have TIMS, we have CPRA requests, and FOIA. I want to focus now on TIMS, right? So SWITRS is this information database, but TIMS basically compiles that and generates, beyond data, it generates a map and information that help tell a story for us, right? So how do we access TIMS? What does it tell us? That's what I would like for you to talk to us about right now. And I know that we have some graphics here for everybody because I think it is something that's really important. So why don't you take that away?
Perfect. So TIMS can be accessed at tims.berkeley.edu. Like I mentioned earlier, this is actually something that's maintained by Cal Berkeley, one of their programs called SafeTrek. And it is going to take all of that crash data and geocode it onto maps. And so when you get to tims.berkeley.edu, you're going to go to the register button and click that to sign up. Once you register with them, it will send you an email with a unique password. And simply by using that password, then you can go ahead and access all of their information. So if we go on to the next slide, there are tons of tools available in TIMS. We're going to focus today on the SWITRS query and map because I think that is most universally helpful. But you can make crash diagrams. You can, there's specific motorcycle crash maps. You can have them map the Safe Routes to School program, which is a statewide program. There's all types of tools that can be utilized within TIMS. And you can then take your relevant data that you obtain through the SWITRS query and actually take that and create crash diagrams. You can create different charts and graphs that we've used in some of our matters in mediations. So it's really, what we're going to go over today is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
But if you go to SWITRS query and map, which you can access from the home screen by going to tools and then drop down to SWITRS query and map, that'll then bring up a screen where you're going to enter the relevant time period that you want to obtain the data for. So I always do the broadest possible search to start. which I believe I said earlier it was 2012 to 2023 is available, but it's actually 2010 to 2023 now.
Okay.
And so I'll go from January 1st of 2010 to 12/31/2023 in that first box that says specify date and location. You're then going to choose the county and the city, or the county and the state route that is relevant to your matter. You're also able to narrow it down by a number of factors such as pedestrians, motorcycles, bicycles, different types of filters. But again, I normally start very broad, as much data as I can obtain relevant to my intersection, because you never know down the line what might be relevant and helpful to your case. So after you do that, you're just going to click show result. And that is going to generate a result summary for the relevant time period and location that you asked for. You can stop right there if you'd like, and you can simply download the raw data at that time using the button on the right side that we've marked with a red arrow. And then you can go you can just simply Control F and search your intersection. You can be done there. However, I find this to be burdensome. This is more similar to what you obtain when you do just the request from the CHP website directly. Right. I recommend instead going to the map feature. And then the next will show the map. It's going to show you a very broad map to start, and then you're going to have to zoom into your specific intersection. This is the clunkiest part of the whole thing. I recommend just doing your own Google search of your intersection first, so that you can figure out how to zoom in, and you'll save yourself time there. But once you've zoomed in, then you're going to be able to see all of the accidents that have occurred in that time period at your relevant intersection. So this has taken me way back to a case that occurred in front of Newport Harbor High School at Margaret Drive and Irvine Avenue in Newport Beach. Our client was a young woman who was hit in a crosswalk there. And in that case, this data was very relevant. And you'll see in this example, each blue flag is an injury accident that occurred during that time period. By pushing on the any blue flag, it's going to bring up just some very, very basic information, including the case ID, some crash details, the location. But then when you push crash details, that's when it's going to populate a new screen for you that lists quite a bit more detailed information. This is everything that is found in the less pretty version of the SWITRS report, but it is much easier for a layperson to understand if you're bringing maybe a stack of these that you've printed into a new client meeting, or if you're less familiar with the SWITRS data and how they categorize different accidents. This is going to kind of boil it down category by category, the information that is maintained in the SWITRS. And so you're going to be able to start looking at the different collisions and see, are there any substantially similar accidents to our subject incident that have occurred in the past? Are there more that are involving pedestrians? If I have a bicycle case, are there other bicycle cases? And then you can start, drawing some comparisons between accidents that have happened in the past and the subject accident you're dealing with. And you can only just see the very top of it, but it does allow you to look at the street view, which can be helpful, because it'll be street view at slightly different areas. And that allows you just to kind of get some different perspective on that intersection, depending on how it's oriented, which can be helpful.
Wow. Okay.
And did you have a question?
No. Go for now. I'm just, this is awesome.
The SWITRS GIS map is, same data, but a different way of looking at it that may be easier if you're downloading this to then share it with an expert or to preserve it for your case. This may be a simpler way to download it so that it's all just saved in one Excel chart instead of, having to print a number of crash details. So if you go to the SWITRS GIS map and you select the crashes at your subject intersection, you can do it a number of different ways. You can do it with a rectangle. You can do it point by point. It's very user friendly. But in this example, we've selected, I don't know, it's probably 20 or so different crashes at the relevant area. You're able to then click download crashes. All of the crashes that you have selected will then populate into one CSV file. And that file is then in a format that your expert will be very familiar with and is an easy item to save to the file. Again, far less visually pleasing. You don't have the nice Google map and the street view available for you, but that is, all of the data preserved, great to save to your file and to look at later. But I do tend to go point by point, open up each crash detail, read through it, and get a good feel for all of the other accidents that have happened at the subject area.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it's
something.
It is, because again, it goes back to sort of our discussion earlier. One, yes, the conversation you're having with client and what you bring to that meeting with them, but also just evaluating a case, right? And
Absolutely.
Whereas before you'd have to, because that's how I started out, you'd have to hire an expert and just say, hey, look, this is where the accident happened. Give me information on it, right? And they go off and do their thing, but that's very expensive. Whereas now, you get to evaluate it. Again, yes, you're going to need an expert eventually, but it becomes like getting a traffic collision report, right? Like, we need a traffic collision report before deciding, are we going to take this, auto v auto case, right? Were they negligent? Were they not? Or I need to look to see what was the sort of investigation. And that helps me make an informed decision on whether or not to take a case, right? And this becomes that information and much more, because now you can say, wow, okay, there were 10 accidents here, or there hasn't been anything here, right? And it helps you evaluate a case and prepare for litigation.
Absolutely. And then you can have that informed conversation with your client about, is this worth an initial evaluation with an expert or not? What the dollar value of that is, what we're seeing in the crash data. It just allows you and empowers you to really have a more educated conversation with your clients from day one. And to then go from there. I actually package up to streamline my use of experts and to try to keep costs as low as possible for my clients. I will package up everything that I obtained from TIMS and from the CPRA or FOIA requests for my expert, send it over to them in a Dropbox link so that I'm not spending my clients' dollars going and having the expert obtain that information. And it becomes a two-way street, conversation with the expert. Did I maybe I missed some things in my CPRA request that they would still like, but gives us somewhere to jump off and opens, begins the conversation in a more educated manner, not only for me, but also for the expert. They're able to take an initial look through what we obtained and say, okay, I think we need to do another CPRA request for these items. Then I like to do it because, again, I'm trying to save every dollar I can for my clients. But it allows us to hit the ground running also with the experts down the line, because we have the information already and we're not wasting valuable time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can you, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you kind of shared with us a little bit about a case where something like this really helped, right? And having information that wasn't produced. Can you think of sort of another case here where there has been, critical information or some interesting story in trying to obtain records at this stage?
I really think that for any case that we're pursuing a dangerous condition or negligent maintenance, the SWITRS are very, at an intersection, obviously, but the SWITRS are so vital. And so knowing what is substantially similar about the other accidents helps gear my mindset, my discovery, my informal discovery, my investigation. It helps gear my mindset from day one. And so I think it's incredibly valuable in really any of my cases involving dangerous condition or negligent maintenance.
Yeah.
Where I think in cases where you're getting deeper into the weeds, like mandatory duty cases where you are alleging that the government has failed to uphold their mandatory duties, that's where I think the CPRA request can really come in handy, because before you have filed that government claim, before you filed your lawsuit, you have submitted a CPRA request for areas that you think there may have been a violation of mandatory duties, and you're getting feedback really faster than even the government knows that the claim is coming, right? And so, I think it's important to think of a CPRA request. Your initial request is just scratching the surface and seeing what's there. I often will submit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 CPRA requests coming out of, I'll get some information. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Now I need to go submit a new request on that, right? And so it allows you to start digging informally, pre-litigation, in ways that are just, again, so vital. And they also just help give you a lot of background. If it's an area that you're not super familiar with, when you read through, maybe you're reading through reports that city council members get before they're making decisions on certain areas, right? And so then you're gaining a lot of information and just expanding your knowledge base. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I can't think of a case involving a government entity where this type of information hasn't been vital. Now, it's not always as exciting as, they redacted a document that they didn't tell me they redacted, right? And suddenly the redacted name and phone number has become like a very key witness.
That's a movie.
Yeah, it is. It's not always that exciting, but again, I think when you're going into these cases, the government can be an expert in their own processes and procedures where there's no playbook for it, right? And how each city and county and government entity handles these matters can be so specific to that area. By obtaining information early through a CPRA request, you're getting an early look into how their processes and procedures operate, which will help guide your discovery and then also prepare you for depositions and PMQs and things down the line, so that you're not the least educated person in the room about those policies and procedures. You're able to jump in a little bit more educated and with a greater knowledge base.
Yeah. All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much for your time. I feel like I could just keep talking about this with you.
Well, it's riveting stuff, I'm sure.
You know what? For us as attorneys, it is though. Like this is what's fun, because it helps us get information. It helps us, litigate our cases and help our clients.
And I think these are tools that young attorneys can bring to the table
100%.
that your senior partners have no idea, right? And so you jump on Tim's in 5 or 10 minutes, you can have a stack of information to bring to them, and they'll be like, wow, how did you do this, right? So I think, these are tools that, while they're incredibly valuable to me years down the line, these were tools that I think can help set young attorneys apart early on. And it's, it's easy to younger people that are more tech savvy, but it's going to, wow your bosses. So that's my other tip, is for young attorneys to jump on some of these tools and become the experts in their office.
That's amazing, Megan. So yes, anybody, you have to listen to this podcast. We're going to clip this part out here. And it's just, you have to listen to the podcast. Young attorneys, this is something that could help you stand out, something that can help you, you for your partners, handling attorneys. Everybody's going to be really impressed if you bring this information to bear. You are contributing at that point, right? And that's amazing. So thank you, Megan. That's a great thing to say. Again, thank you, Megan, for your time. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing and teaching us how to be better attorneys.
Thank you, Kenny. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, until next time, we will see you in the next episode of the Litigators Network.